I never thought a plane ticket would decide the direction of my self-worth, but life has a strange way of turning ordinary events into defining moments. That morning at the airport, the fluorescent lights hummed over rows of impatient travelers. Rolling suitcases clicked against the polished floor, while children tugged at their parents' coats. I clutched my boarding pass like it was a secret I wished no one would see. Printed clearly on the corner, economy class, seat 24B. It wasn't a crime to fly economy, of course, but for my in-laws, appearances were everything. To them, your value was measured in labels, in seating arrangement, in how loudly you announced your importance, and I was about to become their entertainment for the morning. At the gate, they arrived with exaggerated elegance. My father-in-law in his tailored suit, my mother-in-law wrapped in a scarf that probably cost more than my monthly rent. They spotted me instantly. "There she is," my mother-in-law whispered, loud enough for everyone nearby to hear. "Still clutching that little ticket like it's gold." She tilted her head and smirked. "Economy, right? Thought so." I forced a smile, my cheeks burning. My husband was running late from the coffee stand, and suddenly I felt exposed, as if every eye at the gate turned to inspect me. My father-in-law leaned in closer. "You know," he said, "people talk. They notice when someone doesn't belong. Flying with family, yet seated far away. How humiliate." His words sliced sharper than he realized. I wanted to snap back, to defend myself, but the loudspeaker announced boarding for business class. My in-laws stood, flashing their sleek boarding passes like VIP passes to a concert. As they stepped forward, my mother-in-law turned back. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Maybe next time you'll earn a better seat." Her laughter echoed in my ears long after they disappeared down the jet bridge. I sank into the plastic chair, nails digging into the paper boarding pass. I could almost hear the whispers forming in my head. Cheap, less than, outsider. When my husband returned, balancing 2 coffee, he looked at my face and frowned. "What happened?" "They know," I whispered. "They saw my seat." He sighed, setting the cup down. "Ignore them. It's just a seat." But it wasn't just a seat. It was a stage, and I had been cast as the joke. What I didn't know was that the performance was about to flip entirely, because the one person I least expected, the flight attendant, was waiting in the wings to rewrite the ending. The gate agent scanned my boarding pass with a mechanical beep, and for a moment, the sound felt like judgment itself. My in-laws had already disappeared down the jet bridge toward their precious business class seats, while I stood there holding my economy ticket as if it were a scarlet letter. My husband squeezed my shoulder reassuringly before handing over his own pass. He was seated beside me in row 24. At least I wasn't entirely alone. The air inside the plane smelled faintly of coffee, disinfectant, and the recycled breath of hundreds of passengers before us. As we moved down the narrow aisle, I felt eyes grazing over us, though no one knew who I was or why my chest burned with shame. Still, I carried the weight of my mother-in-law's laughter like baggage I couldn't fit overhead. We reached row 24, middle of the plane, middle of everything. I slid into my seat, pressing myself against the window, while my husband tucked his bag below the seat. A family with 2 restless kids filled the row behind us, their cries already testing the patience of weary travelers. Across the aisle, a businessman adjusted his tie and rolled his eyes at the chaos. I could almost hear my mother-in-law's mocking voice. "Enjoy the view from steerage." Before I could sink further into that thought, movement at the front of the cabin caught my eye. My in-laws were parading down the aisle from their business class section. Why they'd returned, I couldn't imagine. My mother-in-law spotted me instantly. "Oh, there she is," she said, loud enough for the rows around us to hear. "Comfortable back there, dear? Plenty of legroom, I'm sure." Her husband chuckled, adding, "Don't worry, sweetheart. We'll wave at you from the curtain." Heat rushed to my cheeks as passengers nearby turned to look at me. Some smirked, others raised eyebrows. I bit my lips so hard I tasted copper. My husband opened his mouth, but my father-in-law had already tugged his wife back toward their section. They disappeared behind the navy curtains separating classes, leaving behind whispers and an unbearable silence. The flight attendant at the rear had noticed. A tall woman with kind eyes, Her blonde hair tied back in a neat bun, she leaned closer to the galley phone, whispering something I couldn't catch. Then she glanced at me, not with pity, but with something sharper, like recognition. She nodded once, almost imperceptibly, before moving to help another passenger. My stomach twisted. Did she hear everything? The plane filled quickly. Overhead, bins snapped shut. Flight attendants bustled up and down the aisles, and the captain's voice boomed over the intercom. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare for departure." The seatbelt light chimed. The plane rumbled backward from the gate, and with every jolt, my heart felt heavier. I wanted to disappear into the window, into the clouds we hadn't yet reached. As the plane accelerated down the runway, I closed my eyes and whispered to myself, "It's just a seat, just a seat." But it wasn't. The climb was bumpy. My husband tried to distract me with small talk, but I caught fragments of voices from business class filtering back. My mother-in-law's laugh carried over like a weapon. I imagined her glass of wine raised, her lips curling as she whispered some new insult about me. My chest tightened. 30 minutes into the flight, meal service began. Carts rattled down the aisle. The attendant from earlier approached our row. She smiled warmly at my husband, then at me. Her eyes lingered, almost searching. "Chicken or pasta?" she asked softly. "Chicken, please," I replied, forcing a polite smile. As she handed me the tray, she leaned just enough to whisper, "Ignore them. You don't deserve that." My breath caught. For a second, I thought I'd imagined it, but the sincerity in her eyes left no doubt. She had heard, she had seen, and she wasn't letting it pass unnoticed. Before I could respond, she straightened and continued down the aisle, her professional smile never faltering. I sat frozen, the plastic tray trembling in my hands. My husband nudged me gently. "What did she say?" "She told me to ignore them." His eyebrows shot up. "She really said that?" I nodded slowly, a strange warmth blooming in my chest. For the first time since boarding, I felt something other than shame. I felt seen. Still, doubt gnawed at me. What could a flight attendant really do? My in-laws had made careers out of belittling me. This was just another stage for their performance. But as the hours ticked by, something subtle shifted. Each time the blonde attendant passed our row, she met my gaze with quiet reassurance. Each time, the weight of my in-laws' mockery seemed to lift a little. And then, halfway through the flight, she returned with a clipboard in hand. She crouched slightly, speaking softly so no one else could hear. "Would you mind stepping forward with me for a moment?" she asked. My heart stuttered. "Is something wrong?" "Not at all," she said, her smile mysterious. "Just come with me." Passengers turned their heads as I followed her down the narrow aisle. My husband shot me a confused look, but she assured him, "Don't worry, sir. We'll be right back." I expected to stop at the galley, maybe answer some mundane security question, but instead, she pushed aside the curtain leading to business class. And there, 2 rows ahead, my in-laws froze mid-sentence, their wine glasses halfway to their lips. The attendant leaned close to me and whispered, "This is your stop." The curtain whispered as the flight attendant drew it aside, and cool air spilled over my arms like a benediction. Business class felt like a different planet. Muted light, wide seats in a 2x2 formation, the soft clink of real glassware instead of plastic. I hovered for a heartbeat in the threshold, acutely aware of every breath I took, every eye that shifted in my direction. My in-laws froze. My mother-in-law's smile curdled. My father-in-law's eyebrows rose, as if he'd just spotted a stain on a white tablecloth. "Oh?" my mother-in-law said, lifting her chin. "Sightseeing, dear?" The flight attendant's tone was velvety, but firm. "Not sightseeing, seating." She glanced at her tablet, then back at me. "Ms. Carter, we'd like to relocate you for comfort and service reasons. Please, right this way." My name in her mouth startled me. I looked from her to my in-laws. My father-in-law let out a quiet, incredulous laugh. "Comfort and service? For her?" The attendant didn't flinch. "For her," she said simply, then turned to me with a soft smile that belonged entirely to me. "Seat 2A." She led me to the window in the second row. A crisp pillow weighted against a pale gray shell. The armrest hid a tray table that slid out with a satisfying hush. There was space to breathe here. space to take up without apology. I slid in and exhaled, not realizing I'd been holding my breath since the gate. She handed me a small paper slip, my reissued boarding pass, stamped in neat letters, Business, 2A. It looked unreal, like something I'd forged in a dream. "Is this allowed?" I whispered. Her eyes smiled. She lowered her voice. More than allowed. "We had an inoperative seat back at 24C, and a few operational seats free up here. Consider this a service recovery." And her glance flicked toward the front, toward my in-laws. A reminder that courtesy still travels well. Heat stung my eyes, but for the first time that day, it wasn't shame. "Thank you," I managed. "Can I bring you something to drink? Water, orange juice, sparkling wine?" "Water, please," I said. "With lime, if you have it." "We do." She straightened with that floating grace all good cabin crew possess. "Welcome aboard, Ms. Carter." My phone buzzed against my thigh. My husband, him. "Where did you go?" I typed back under the lip of the armrest. "Me." They moved me to 2A, a beat. Then, him. "Are you serious? Business? What happened?" Me. "I'll explain. Are you okay back there?" Him. "Better than okay knowing you're okay. I'll see you after landing." Hearts. The heart floored me more than the upgrade. I tucked the phone away, fingers suddenly steadier. Across the aisle, my in-laws watched, small storms brewing in fine china eyes. My mother-in-law cleared her throat, addressing the flight attendant as she returned with my water, a translucent wedge of lime floating like a tiny emerald lifeboat. "Excuse me," she said. Sweetness poured over fine grit. "We're traveling as a family. She belongs in economy. We paid for." The attendant met her gaze without the slightest wobble. "We assign seats at our discretion for safety, service, and operational needs, ma'am. Ms. Carter is our guest in 2A. My mother-in-law fluttered a hand. "But she didn't purchase—" "Ma'am," the attendant repeated, that bedtime soft voice now edged with steel. "The decision is final." A man in 1C, salt and pepper hair, reading glasses perched low, glanced up from his newspaper. "Sounds like the airline made a good call," he murmured. Not quite to anyone, but not quite to no one, either. My father-in-law's mouth pinched. He tipped his glass, swallowing hard. I lifted my water and took a slow sip. The lime was real, the glass chilled, the liquid clean. I could feel my shoulders unclench and settle where they belonged. It wasn't just the seat. It was the message encoded in it. "You are not the punchline." The purser swept through with the warmth of a seasoned host. "Welcome," she said to the cabin at large, and then to me specifically. "If there's anything you need, please let us know." Her eyes flicked toward the curtain, then back to me with the subtlest of winks, as if she too had seen the show at the gate and was intent on changing the ending. Meal orders began again up front. A ballet of linen napkins and silverware wrapped in white. The attendant paused at my seat. "We have a citrus herb chicken or a mushroom risotto. Both come with a salad and a warm roll." "Chicken, please." "Excellent choice." She angled the tray onto my table with a little flourish, as if she'd been waiting all morning to serve me specifically. "Would you like sparkling water to go with it?" "Still is perfect," I smiled. "Thank you. What's your name?" "Emma. I'll be just here if you need anything." "Emma," I repeat, committing it to memory like a word that could open doors. When she moved on, my mother-in-law leaned across the aisle, voice pitched low. "Enjoy your little moment. It won't last." I set my fork down with a quiet click. "It doesn't need to," I said, my voice even. "It already did what it needed to do." Her eyes narrowed. "And what's that?" Changed the view. A flush crept up her neck. She opened her mouth, then closed it, as the purser arrived with a breadbasket. "Warm roll?" the purser asked pleasantly. My mother-in-law took one with fingers so tight they whitened. Somewhere behind the curtain, a baby cried and then quieted. The plane hummed forward through sky so smooth it felt deliberate. I ate slowly, not because I wanted to stretch the moment, I did, but because it was the first time that day my body felt like it belonged to me. Emma reappeared midway through the course, leaning in discreetly. "If your companion would like to join you after service, we may have a second seat opening. We're waiting on a connecting passenger who didn't make the departure. If they no-show the flight, we can release 2C." My heart jumped. "My husband," she nodded. "I noticed your booking. Same last name." Her eyes softened. "We take care of the people who take care of each other." I nodded, grateful and a little stunned. Thank you. I sent a quick message. Me. They might move you up after meal service. 2C could open. Him. Stop. I'm already crying into my pretzels. Me. Save me one. Him. Not a chance. I laughed under my breath, a small, private sound that felt like a newly found key. Across the aisle, my father-in-law set down his empty glass a little too hard. "We'll see about this," he muttered, and pressed the call button. The chime pinged bright as a bell. Emma answered almost instantly. "Yes, sir? We'd like to file a complaint," he said, "against your allocation practices. This is preferential treatment." Emma considered him for exactly 1 measured second. "You're absolutely welcome to share feedback, sir." She produced a small card with a URL and QR code. "In the meantime, please let us know if you need anything for your comfort." "What I need," he said, "is fairness." Emma's smile didn't falter. "That's what we're serving." The card remained in his hand like a prop he'd forgotten how to use. He didn't press the issue. Trays were cleared, cabin lights dimmed to a golden hush. The forward galley glowed like a lantern. I slipped on the thick headphones from the console, but left them around my neck so I could hear if Emma returned. My chest felt light. I thought of the woman who had walked under those fluorescent airport lights, bracing for mockery, and I wanted to reach back through time and tell her, "You will sit where you can see the horizon." A soft chime. Emma appeared again, tablet in hand, eyes bright. She bent close. "2C is released," she whispered. "Would you like me to bring your husband forward?" Emotion surged so fast I had to grip the armrest. "Yes," I said. "Please." She nodded and slipped behind the curtain. Seconds later, I heard my husband's voice, soft, disbelieving, followed by the light shuffle of his steps. The curtain parted, and there he was, a little wind blown from the walk up the aisle, a grin breaking across his face like sunrise. "Is this seat taken?" he asked, playing along. "Only if you promise to share your pretzels." He placed a tiny, crumpled bag in my palm with theatrical solemnity. A man keeps his promises. As he buckled into 2C, I felt an almost physical click, like a misaligned frame finally set right on the wall. Across the aisle, my in-laws sat very straight, very quiet. For once, there was nothing for them to say. The story had slipped from their hands. Emma passed between us, pausing only long enough to lay a hand on my seat back. A gentle, steady touch that said, "You're safe." Then she moved on, a conductor bringing the cabin back to harmony. The captain's voice floated down. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're cruising comfortably at 35,000 feet. We've got a favorable wind and should have you on the ground a few minutes early." Early! The word felt prophetic. I looked at my husband. He looked at me. He mouthed, "You okay?" I nodded. For the first time that day, the answer was uncomplicated. Somewhere in the quiet, my phone buzzed again. A message from an unknown number. I opened it, frowning. A single line. "We need to talk when we land." "Mom." I felt the plane tilt almost imperceptibly, as if the sky itself had leaned in to listen. The message on my phone glared at me like a sudden warning light on the dashboard. "We need to talk when we land." Mom. Not my mom, my mother-in-law. The woman who measured worth in wine glasses and seating charts. My throat tightened. I locked the screen quickly, as if hiding evidence of a crime. My husband tilted his head toward me. "Everything okay?" I forced a smile. "Just another comment from her." His jaw clenched. "Ignore it. This is your flight too, not her stage." But the words dug under my skin like splinters. What did she mean? Talk about what? The upgrade? My place in this family? Something else entirely? The cabin lights dimmed further, cocooning us in an amber twilight. Outside, the sky was a sweep of velvet blue stitched with stars. Yet all I could see was the glow of her text, burning behind my eyelid. Across the aisle, my in-laws sat stiff as marble statues. My father-in-law sipped from his glass with the grim determination of a man drowning pride in Cabernet. My mother-in-law scrolled on her phone, lips pressed thin, eyes flicking toward me every so often. Each glance felt like a tether, yanking me back into their orbit. Emma, the attendant, floated down the aisle with practiced serenity. She paused at our row, her eyes brushing mine. "Can I offer dessert? We have a chocolate tart or fruit and cheese." "Chocolate," I said quickly, maybe too quickly, as if sugar could anchor me. "Fruit," my husband added, his voice calm, steady, opposite to the storm inside me. Emma smiled, set down the plates, and leaned in just slightly. "You don't owe them anything," she whispered, before gliding away. Her words struck like a spark in dry tinder. I wanted to believe her. I wanted to stand taller in this seat, to own the air I breathed. But the text in my pocket whispered back, "Wait until landing." Half an hour later, the cabin hushed. Passengers pulled blankets to their chins, screens flickered with muted movies, and the rhythmic hum of the engines became a lullaby. My husband closed his eyes, head tilted against the seat back. I tried to rest, too, but the restlessness chewed at me. Memories crowded in. Dinners where my mother-in-law dissected my choices in front of guests. Her habit of introducing me as my son's wife instead of by name. The way she always found a way to cut me down and make it sound like etiquette. And now she wanted to talk when we landed. The thought curdled my stomach. I pulled out my phone again, the faint glow lighting my hand. I typed a message to my best friend back home. She humiliated me at the gate. Now they upgraded me. She just texted, wants to talk after landing. A bubble popped up almost instantly. "Best friend, don't let her bait you. Hold your head high. The upgrade says it all." I stared at the words until my vision blurred. Maybe she was right. Maybe the win wasn't just the seat. It was being seen, not just by strangers or staff, but by myself. Hours passed. The seatbelt sign dinged softly as the captain announced our descent. "Ladies and gentlemen, we'll begin our approach shortly. Please return to your seats and fasten your belts." Emma and her colleagues swept gracefully through the cabin, checking latches and trays. She leaned toward me one last time. "You've handled today with grace," she said softly. "Don't forget that when you step off this plane." Her words nestled into my chest, warm against the cold weight of my mother-in-law's message. The nose of the aircraft dipped, the ground rising to meet us. Lights sparkled below. Cities like constellations flipped upside down. Passengers stirred, stretching, tucking away headphones. The familiar shudder of landing gear clunked beneath us, and the roar of engines deepened. My husband reached for my hand. I let him hold it, our fingers twining like roots. I braced myself, not for touchdown, but for whatever waited on the other side of customs and baggage claim. The tires kissed the runway with a jolt, then a rumble, then the shriek of brakes. My body lurched forward, caught by the belt. The cabin tilted, slowed, steadied. We were down. Applause erupted from a few rows back, as it sometimes does, nervous energy released into clapping palms. I barely heard it. My pulse was its own thunder. The plane taxied, slowed, turned toward the gate. Seatbelt lights pinged off. Passengers leapt up, rummaging for bags in the overheads. Emma's voice rang clear. "Please remain seated until the aircraft has come to a complete stop at the gate." But no one listened, including my in-laws. They rose, adjusting jackets and scarves with theatrical flair. My mother-in-law glanced across the aisle at me. "Ready to chat, dear?" she said sweetly. Venom threaded through every syllable. My husband bristled, but I touched his wrist. "Later," I murmured. "Not here." She smiled like a cat with cream. "Oh, don't worry. Everyone will know soon enough." The words sank like ice. Everyone will know? Know what? The jet bridge groaned as it connected. The seatbelt light blinked off for good. People surged forward, anxious to disembark. Emma stood at the curtain, her poise unbroken, as if guarding the threshold between air and ground. When we stepped off, her voice was the last thing I heard inside the plane. "Have a wonderful evening, Ms. Carter." I carried it with me like armor. Inside the terminal, chaos resumed. Rolling suitcases, overhead announcement, the echo of footsteps on tile. My in-laws waited near the baggage carousel, their posture stiff, their expressions unreadable. My mother-in-law's phone chimed. She read a message, then looked at me with a smile that chilled the blood in my veins. "Shall we?" she said. Her husband folded his arms. "It's time." "Time for what?" My mouth went dry. My husband stepped closer, protective, but they were already walking toward the exit doors. My instincts screamed to follow, even though every nerve told me it was a trap. I turned to him. "We can't ignore this." He nodded grimly. "Then, let's finish it." The automatic doors slid open. Cool night air swept in, carrying the scent of jet fuel and asphalt. My in-laws stood just outside, shadows under the harsh yellow glow of the street lamps. I tightened my grip on my husband's hand, lifted my chin, and stepped forward. Whatever waited, the runway lights of my courage were finally on. The night air outside the terminal clung to my skin, heavy with jet fuel and the faint odor of fast food drifting from a stand by the curb. My in-laws stood a few paces ahead, their figures rigid under the yellow wash of the street lamps. My mother-in-law held her phone at her side like a weapon she had not yet revealed, her lips curved in the kind of smile that promised trouble. My husband and I slowed, neither of us eager to close the distance, but momentum carried us forward. People pushed carts of luggage around us, taxis honked impatiently, but all I could hear was the rush of blood in my ears. "So," my mother-in-law began as we reached them. Her voice was sugar-coated but sharp enough to slice. "Quite a show you put on today. First economy, then business. Must have felt thrilling, playing the part of someone you're not." She lifted her chin as though she were the gatekeeper of status itself. "But the curtain always falls, dear." I swallowed hard, my voice catching in my throat. I didn't ask for that upgrade. The attendant moved me. I hated how defensive I sounded, but the truth deserved air. My father-in-law snorted. A sound of disbelief and contempt rolled into one. "People like you don't end up in business class by chance," he said. "There's always a scheme, always an angle." Before I could speak, my husband stepped forward, his voice steady but fierce. "That's enough. She didn't manipulate anything. She was humiliated at the gate, and you know it. The staff saw it, everyone saw it, and they chose to treat her with the respect you never do." His words struck the night air like sparks, but my mother-in-law only smiled wider, like she'd been waiting for this. She raised her phone and tilted the screen toward us. A message glowed in the light, a notification from a legal office. My name was in the subject line. My stomach dropped. "What is that?" I whispered. She savored the moment. "An appointment," she said, "with our lawyer. You see, dear, there's a matter of inheritance. You've been living comfortably under the impression that things are stable. But when we land here, reality changes. There are papers to sign, and you won't like what they say." My husband's face went pale. "You kept this from us? You waited until after the flight, after humiliating her, to drop this?" My mother-in-law's smile sharpened. "Timing is everything, and tonight, the timing is perfect." My knees wobbled. Inheritance, papers, legalities. The pieces began to click into a picture I wasn't sure I wanted to see. I clutched my husband's hand tighter, grounding myself in the warmth of his palm. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice trembling but determined. "What could possibly involve me?" She leaned closer, her perfume a cloud of expensive roses masking the bitterness beneath. "You'll find out soon enough. But let me give you a hint. Belonging has a price. And you, sitting up there in business class, pretending to be one of us, you haven't paid it." My father-in-law folded his arm, his face a mask of satisfaction. "The talk is tomorrow morning. Be ready." They turned in unison, heading toward a waiting black car at the curb. The driver held the door, and they slid inside without another word. The door shut with a thud that felt like final judgment. The car pulled away, taillights glowing red against the dark. And then they were gone. Silence pressed down on us, broken only by the squeak of luggage wheels and the distant bark of a security officer directing traffic. I turned to my husband. "What just happened?" My voice cracked on the edges. He pulled me close, wrapping his arms around me, but his expression was tight, his eyes shadowed. "They've been fighting over your late grandmother's estate," he said slowly. "I thought it was settled months ago, but clearly it isn't. And if they're involving you," he trailed off, shaking his head. "This isn't about a seat on a plane anymore. This is about control." I felt the ground tilt under me, though we were firmly on solid concrete. Control. That word carried the weight of chains. My mind raced back through every smirk, every whispered insult, every time they'd made me feel less. It was never just about appearance. It was always about reminding me of my place, or the place they thought I deserved. "I won't let them decide who I am," I whispered, more to myself than to him. He lifted my chin, his eyes fierce despite the fatigue of travel. "You don't have to. Not anymore." A car horn blared, and the spell broke. We collected our bags, hailed a taxi, and slid inside. The driver asked for our address, and my husband gave it without hesitation. As the car pulled away from the terminal, I pressed my forehead to the cool window and watched the city lights smear into gold and white streaks. Tomorrow would bring a conversation I never wanted, but could no longer avoid. Tonight, I needed to gather strength. The ride was quiet, both of us lost in thought. I traced the condensation on the glass with my fingertip, remembering Emma's words, "You don't owe them anything." Maybe she was right. Maybe the upgrade wasn't just a gift of comfort, but a glimpse into a different future, one where I stopped playing the role they wrote for me. When we finally reached home, the suitcase wheels echoed in the hallway as we entered. The clock on the wall read past midnight. My husband set the bags down with a sigh. "Get some rest," he said gently. "We'll face them together tomorrow." I nodded, though my chest buzzed with nerves too restless for sleep. In the quiet of our bedroom, I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, the words looping in my mind. Belonging has a price. But as dawn approached, I realized something else. Maybe belonging to them wasn't the prize at all. Maybe the real victory would be proving that I didn't need their permission to belong anywhere. Morning light streamed through the blinds, thin gold lines cutting across the bedroom wall. I had hardly slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother-in-law's smile and the glowing text on her phone. My husband brewed coffee in the kitchen, the rich aroma floating down the hall. But even that familiar comfort couldn't steady my nerves. Today was the talk. Today, I would find out what she meant, what she had planned, and what price she thought I owed. We arrived at the law office just after 9. The building was sterile glass and steel, reflecting the busy street outside. My stomach churned as we rode the elevator up. The waiting room was lined with leather chairs and framed diplomas. My in-laws were already there, perfectly composed, sipping water from crystal glasses, as though this was a social call rather than an ambush. My mother-in-law's eyes flicked to me, and a satisfied smile touched her lips. My father-in-law didn't even bother with pretense. His glare was sharp enough to cut glass. The lawyer entered moments later, a man in a gray suit with a calm face that revealed nothing. "Thank you all for coming," he said, gesturing toward the conference room. We followed him inside, the walls lined with books I doubted anyone had opened in years. At the center of the polished table lay a stack of folders, each labeled neatly with our name. He cleared his throat. "We're here to finalize the distribution of assets from the estate of Margaret Carter, your late grandmother." His eyes rested on me briefly before continuing. "Certain stipulations in her will require clarification." My breath caught. Grandmother Margaret had been the one person in my husband's family who treated me with warmth. She'd welcomed me when no one else did, insisted I call her by her first name, and once told me privately, "Don't let them dim your light." She had passed 6 months earlier, and I thought everything had been resolved. Apparently not. The lawyer opened the first folder. Mrs. Carter left specific bequests to her children and grandchildren. However, she included an additional provision regarding a property in Vermont, a cabin she owned by the lake. My husband frowned. "I thought that went to my parents." The lawyer shook his head. "Not exactly. The will stipulates that the property will belong to the family member who demonstrates, in the executor's judgment, the greatest dedication to preserving her values of kindness, humility, and integrity." His eyes shifted again toward me. "Your grandmother believed these values would reveal themselves naturally after her passing." My mother-in-law laughed, sharp and brittle. "Well, then it's obviously ours. We've maintained appearances, hosted family gatherings, contributed financially." "Appearances," the lawyer interrupted gently, "were not what Margaret meant. She emphasized actions, not displays." He shuffled the papers and pulled out a document. In fact, she left a handwritten note addressed to her executor. It describes a moment she witnessed. He read aloud. "During a family dinner, when others mocked and excluded her, she stayed gracious. She offered kindness where none was returned. That resilience is the mark of true character. I want her to have the cabin." Silence filled the room like thunder. The words hung in the air, undeniable. My chest tightened as I realized what they meant. Grandmother Margaret had seen me. She had chosen me. The lawyer folded his hands. "Therefore, in accordance with the will, the cabin and its assets passed to her granddaughter-in-law." His eyes locked with mine. "To you, Ms. Carter." My mother-in-law's face drained of color. "This is absurd," she hissed. "She's an outsider. She doesn't carry our name by blood." The lawyer's expression didn't waver. "The will is explicit. Margaret named her directly. I am bound to honor it." My father-in-law slammed his hand against the table, making the folders jump. "You mean to tell me she gets what we've built, what we deserve, because of some performance?" I found my voice then, surprising even myself with its steadiness. "It wasn't a performance. It was survival. Every time you mocked me, every time you tried to humiliate me, I chose not to become like you. That wasn't for show. That was who I am." My husband placed a hand on mine, his eyes shining with pride. "And that's exactly why she deserves it." The lawyer slid the final papers across the table. "If you'll all sign here, we can proceed." My mother-in-law stared at the document, her lips trembling with rage. She didn't pick up the pen. "This isn't over," she whispered. "You think a cabin makes you one of us? You'll always be less." I looked at her, and for the first time I didn't feel small. I didn't feel cheap or out of place. I felt rooted, steady, as if Grandmother Margaret's spirit herself was standing beside me. "I don't need to be one of you," I said softly. "I just need to be true to myself." That's what she wanted, and that's what I'll honor. The lawyer cleared his throat. "Then we're finished here." We signed the documents, my hand trembling only slightly as the pen scratched my name into permanence. The cabin was mine. But more than that, the validation was mine, the confirmation that all those years of being underestimated had not gone unseen. When we left the building, sunlight spilled across the pavement, warm and golden. My husband squeezed my hand. "Proud of you," he whispered. I smiled, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm proud too. Not because of the cabin, but because I finally stood tall." Behind us, my in-laws lingered in the shadow of the doorway, their faces carved in stone. But their power over me had cracked, maybe for good. The sky above stretched wide and endless, and for the first time I felt like I was flying, without a seat number defining who I was.